thinking about people who helped me in my career as and I'd like to add Nathan Warshaw to the list um, of Abe Lipkins and Jules Gerson. Uh, he helped in this way. He and his wife were in their 80s and had a summer home on Mahopac Point. And after a while, they found it difficult to find decent help. They needed a cook and cleaner and groundskeepers, and they decided to try the Forest House in the summertime. If they would sell their house and move into one of the new rooms with a deck, with the deck outside, that was the lower level of the new wing. And they would try it and see how it worked out. At any rate, after a few weeks of the summer, Nathan Warshaw asked me about using our hotel as a kind of retirement home, at least in the summertime. I'm sure he had a winter home in New York City. He had a patent on something he invented to do with the paper business, and he had a lot of money, but they were getting old, and he liked the idea of, first of all, they loved the food at our hotel, and he liked the idea of not having any worries about getting help for the summertime. The only thing he was missing was a place in which he could continue to do his work on his inventions and be outside in the sunlight. So he asked me if he could put up a greenhouse near the new wing. It would be about 10 feet long and 5 feet wide, and be enclosed in glass, and he could grow plants in there and have a desk for his work. Well, I couldn't see any reason why that wouldn't help me. It meant he would be spending more time as a guest, and an addition of a greenhouse would certainly look okay. So I said that would be fine, and he proceeded to have somebody build that greenhouse for him, and it ended up as being lovely in the place that they put it. The reason I think of him is because when it came to building the road that was required for that subdivision, I was told by the town that I had to put up a $50,000 bond to guarantee completion of the road, and in a manner that the town would deem proper for them to be able to take over the maintenance of the road, so that people living in that subdivision, when the houses would be built there, would have access to their property, and in case of snowstorms or anything else that might prevent it, the town would take care of that road if it were built properly, and that's what they wanted the bond for. I didn't have that kind of money, and I didn't know how I could handle this. So I went and spoke to Nathan Warshaw about it, and it seems like it was possible for him or me to put up collateral, bonds or other collateral, that amounted to $50,000, and that would guarantee the completion of the road in a way that the town deemed suitable for them to take it over. So, in effect, he only had to put some bonds up with the town, and he could still continue to get the interest on the bonds. And eventually, when the road was finished according to town specifications, and I had sold some of the lots to get that $50,000 back, they would return these bonds to Nathan. Anyway, he agreed to do that for me without any hesitation, and so I was allowed to continue with that subdivision plan. Thinking about this situation of people helping also brings me to the fact that I started to be concerned about keeping our chef, Erwin Mosier, who had started working at the hotel when he was 15 years old, and now many years later, I guess about 40 years later, he was the head chef and had contributed, or actually was the reason that we had such a fine reputation for the cuisine that we offered to the guests. And when you think about it, guests came here not just for the rooms, but for the 3 meals a day that they got with this stay. He really was a good manager of people, and in the summertime he would have, maybe 12 people working in the kitchen and interacting with the waitresses and busboys. That would be another 15. He was an important part of my running of the hotel, and I wanted to make sure that he was happy and would continue to stay on this particular job. He had a wife and 5 children, and he lived in Carmel in a nice little house, and his wife was a school teacher, and between his pay as chef at the Forest House and her income from teaching, they were living a comfortable life. I found out from my insurance agent that there was such a thing as key man insurance, which meant that I could take out insurance to guarantee to a key man like the head chef that his salary or income would remain fixed if any changes should take place, like my selling the hotel or going out of business. And so I took out a policy. I explained this to Erwin Mosier, and I took out a policy for $20,000, which in those days was more than a year's salary for him, to guarantee that in almost no matter what happened, as long as he stayed on the job, he would be guaranteed that money if any change occurred in which he was no longer needed. And it gave him some security and made him feel pretty happy. Another person important in this whole transaction that was taking place was a man by the name of Donald Hill, who lived on Hill Street. His family had lived there so long that the road, when it was built, was called Hill Street. And Donald was in the contracting building business, and he was the one that I hired to put in this road. I knew him, I had known him, and his reputation was fine, and I had no doubt that he would do a good job on building that road. Other people important in the hotel over the years was a dance team, Benito and Gloria Vitucci. Who were the winners of the Harvest Moonball contest in Madison Square Garden some years earlier, and they spent weekends, holiday weekends, and the summertime at the hotel, acting as dance teachers and putting on exhibitions to start our shows. They were a terrific couple, and added to the ambiance of the hotel. And I had to provide room and board for them while they were there, but they earned their own money, and I didn't have to pay them anything. They became friends of ours. They taught Babe and me how to dance better, and Bob learned to dance from Gloria, and on occasion he would work the show with Gloria, and of course it was very cute to see him about 3.5 feet high dancing with her, who was about 5 feet 8. It added fun to our lives and variety. In addition to them, there was a folk dance teacher who came from a hotel, Plum Point, that was established on the west side of the Hudson River, only about 25 miles from us. And when they closed, she came to work for us as a folk dance teacher, and she had a very good reputation with the single clientele of that of Plum Point, the name of the hotel that she had been working at, and attracted them to our place, and also gave single people a reason for coming to the Forest House, and added to our general business. While mentioning individuals, I have to talk about the band that worked at the hotel. Starting with back in the 1940s, there was a Russian group, Eli Spivak, and two other people who provided music and entertainment for the guests, and ending up with three guys by the name of Harry, Larry, and Alex, who worked there for the last 10 years that we had the hotel. And they provided dance music for the nightclub, but also as the accompanist for any show people that came to perform. Harry was the piano player, and he could sight read any kind of music, and was a terrific accompanist for any singers that came. They too became friends, although they were friends that we had paid because they had to earn a living. But they added a great deal to the ambiance of the hotel. Bob developed the ability to tape their music, and they didn't mind him doing that. And what he did was tape them when they were playing dance music, and then use that tape when the band was not there to play danceable music to people who wanted to dance without the orchestra being present. So Bob developed all by himself recording capabilities, and gave him some skills and gave us this valuable addition that we could use when the band was not available. Talking about skills that Bob picked up, it reminds me of a time when he was about 7 years old, and I think he had measles or chicken pox and was confined to his room for about a week. And at that time, I had bought a typewriter to use at home, and with it came a record and a player, just a record, but we had playing facilities for it that taught anyone who would use this record how to touch type. And at age 7, and being confined for a week, Bob listened to that tape and learned how to touch type, so that at the end of a week, he was fairly proficient at typing. That was a godsend, because being left-handed, his handwriting was not too good, and the typing ability was useful for the rest of his life, and became especially useful when computers came along and you had to type in order to use them. Bob and Sheila were doing well in school. As a matter of fact, when Bob finished his 3rd year in that grade, in 3rd grade, his teacher or the school got in touch with us and said, Bob is doing so well, we would like to move him next term after the summer. Instead of going to the 4th grade, we'd like to put him into the 5th grade because he needs a little more challenging work, and he could handle that pretty easily. Well, we were very proud of that, and didn't fully consider the social part of it, because the problems would arise because Bob was small for his age. So he was the smallest kid in the 3rd grade, and now they were going to move him to the 5th grade, where he would be moved in with boys a year older than him and probably much larger. However, we didn't consider that fully. And probably there wasn't any good answer, because if he was moved to the fourth year, he would find the work too easy. And if he was moved to the fifth grade, he would find the social problems of dealing with bigger boys a problem. But we agreed that he would move, and Bob was moved at the end of the summer when the fall season started to the fifth grade. And of course, he was tiny compared to the other kids who had sprouted up, and he hadn't hit his spurt yet. The problem occurred was that he was eager to do well and always ready when the teacher asked a question to offer the first answer. In other words, he was too forward in this, had been in the other class with younger kids, but now with the older kids, they resented him always having the right answer and always yelling it out, and they didn't take it too kindly. He was subjected to bullying, and they used to punch him on his shoulder, on his arms, and he came and complained to me about it, and I said, well, when it happened to me, I had to fight and throw the first punch and deal with it that way. But the fact was that when I was in school, I was big for my age, and he was tiny. And there really wasn't a physical way that he could deal with this. So what he did was retreat and not participate as actively as he used to. And as a matter of fact, we were called to school by his teachers, who said that Bob was not participating well, and his grades dropped. And they didn't know the reason for it, but it was his way of dealing with this situation. He stopped participating by keeping quiet, not rushing forward with the correct answers, and hoping that this would stop the bullying that he was experiencing. As far as I know now, the bullying continued for a couple of years. Bob dealt with it somehow. Eventually, he was pretty popular with the people in his class. He played the trumpet in the school band. He followed his sister as the editor of the school paper, where his typing skills stood him in good stead. And he graduated from high school near the top of his class. At the same time, following just a year behind Sheila, instead of their age group, he was 2 years behind, but having been moved up one grade, he was only a year behind, and took over the editorship of the school paper from her when she graduated. One thing that was going on in high schools those years was the prevalence of pot smoking and possibly other drugs with kids in high school, and Bob and Sheila experimented with pot, and as a matter of fact, I think one or more of them, either Bob or Sheila or both of them, were buying and selling pot, and it became known to the police that something was going on, and the police, in the person of Tommy Bergen, came to the hotel and sat down with Bob and Sheila to talk to them about what their participation in this practice was going to have on them. It was interesting because Tommy Bergen was a new police officer, probably had only been a policeman for 2 or 3 years. But when he was a youth, he had worked for quite a few years as a bellhop at the Forest House, and he had warm feelings about me and Babe, and some understanding and care about the fact that Bob and Sheila were our children. He told them that he was aware that they were not only smoking, but buying and selling pot. And they could get into a lot of trouble. If it was anybody else, if he didn't know them as people and us as their parents, that he probably would bring them up before a judge. But he's talking to them now to try to prevent any further problems that they might have. And they better cut it out and straighten up, or they would be in a lot of trouble. I think it had some effect. At least it made them be a lot more careful as to what they were doing and think about it. Sheila was in the graduating class and had done very well for herself, having a lot of friends, doing well, especially on her Regents exams. As a matter of fact, she had the highest grade point average in Putnam County on her Regent exams, and ordinarily that would have brought her a full scholarship to Cornell University, where she was intending to go. However, that year, Putnam County was considered too small an area for such an honor, and had part of the northern Westchester had been added to Putnam County, and unfortunately somebody in Westchester had a slightly higher point grade average on their Regents exams than she did, and so she missed that by a hair. As a matter of fact, it was very hard to get into Cornell in those days. They had 10 times the number of people applying as they could take in. And even with her grades, it wasn't, she only got on the wait list to get into Cornell. And I remember that Babe and I were in the city at a restaurant, and we knew that a call would be coming in about whether she made it or not. And we had told Ray and Sheila where we would be, and they called us to say they had gotten a call and that she had been accepted. So that was a big celebration. Bob had another year to go, and when time came from him to pick a place to go, he also chose Cornell, but he applied to the hotel school, and evidently it was easier to get into the hotel school than the general population going to Cornell, because he didn't have any trouble in being accepted. And so within the 2 years, both kids had finished high school, picked a good school to go to for college, and been accepted. And we had a little money, and when Sheila went off, we had bought her a Carmen Ghia so that she could take it to school and use it to come home in occasionally. And when Bob went, he also got a Carmen Ghia. So we were all very happy, and I think at that point the kids were in a good way. In the year that Sheila finished her first year at Cornell, and Bob was getting ready to go, we had decided to take a family vacation to the Virgin Islands, not taking a ride on a windjammer, but renting a house on a small island called Little Camanoe Island, just off Tortola, and we rented that for 2 weeks and thought that it would be the last time probably that we would all be able to have the time and to be together for two weeks. It was kind of amazing that this place was available. I think that we rented it for something like $500 for the 2 weeks, and that came with a nice house and a boat a boat with an outboard motor and about 20 feet in length, so that we weren't restricted to remaining on this Little Camanoe island, but could go prospecting around to other islands in the neighborhood. There was no electricity on this island, and there were probably 4 or 5 houses, but each had a generator to provide enough electricity to give you light and refrigeration. And the people we rented the house from had stocked the refrigerator with enough food for us to last almost a week. And at the end of that time, we needed to take a trip to Tortola to refresh our supplies. Our trip there was kind of interesting. We flew into St. Thomas, the 4 of us, and we had arranged for a small plane to pick us up in St. Thomas and fly us to Tortola, which was maybe 20 miles. And then when we got to Tortola, we would have to take a little ferry taxi, like a small boat, to take us over to our island of Little Camanoe. We were a little surprised to find that this plane that we were taking only had accommodations for 4 passengers and the pilot. And Bob and Sheila and Babe got into the back of this plane, and I had a seat next to the pilot. When I sat down, he gave me a string, and I said, "What's this for?" He said, "Oh, you have to tie the door closed because it's liable to swing open." So to use the string to tie the door, well, that was a little scary, but we didn't have far to go, and we didn't make any fuss over it. Anyway, we made the trip. It probably took 5 minutes to fly over, or 10 minutes. And we flew from St. Thomas to Tortola, and then got a taxi from the airport to the north end of the island, and then a small boat took us to our abode, our island